Welcome, 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 everybody. Welcome to TransParents. I believe this is our 40th. I am one of the hosts, Amber. She, her, my pronouns, and you can find me on TikTok at Moonchild77. Please follow us there until I can go live. We put these out as two-parters or one-parters, depending on how the length of it, on TikTok after the episode airs. But once it goes, I can go live. We will actually put this on live on TikTok as well. And this is my co-host. Let her
Hey,
introduce herself.
I am Jenny. My pronouns are also she, her. You can find me on TikTok because I did get my account reactivated at TransLovingMama. It was down for a moment because Libs of TikTok put me on Twitter, and that was fun. That was a fun little adventure for me. And I got a taste of what it was like to, just be a person completely attacked all day long. And it sucked. But I'm back. Everything is good. Find me there.
Woohoo! And this is our special guest this evening, Dr. Michael Stinnett, and I'm going to read off his little bio, if you will. He is the founder of Oceanview Mental Health and Wellness, where he dedicates his expertise to providing comprehensive mental health services tailored specifically for the LGBTQIA plus community. With a deep commitment to advocacy and support, Dr. Stinnett's work at Oceanview focuses on creating a safe and inclusive environment where individuals can receive the care they need to thrive. His passion for mental health and wellness is evident in his compassionate approach and dedication to addressing the unique challenges faced by the gender diverse community. In tonight's episode, we delve into the services offered by Oceanview and explore his journey and motivations. We aim to provide support and guidance for those who might be struggling with the uncertainty of their rights to live authentically. So Dr. Michael, or Dr. Stinnett, however you want us to refer to you tonight, thank you so much for being here. It is such a pleasure.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for having me. And please, Michael is perfectly fine.
Awesome. We came across, you came across my stuff and contacted me back. Actually, I was out for surgery. And so I was kind of not quite coherent. And I remember texting Jenny, hey, I've got somebody, a group, and we need to bring them on when I can think again. And so it took us a while to kind of get this rolling and get us where we could schedule and bring you on. But I was delighted to find out about Oceanview because it's in North Carolina. It's from my state, my home state. So that was a pleasure to find out about somebody who's actually doing work here in our community and actually that's local into the communities that I'm actually from, which is more eastern, the East Coast, if you will. I'm inner coast. So that area, Wilmington, is much more open, I think, open-minded and accepting compared to where I was from in eastern North Carolina. So I think the fact that you were doing work across southeastern North Carolina, that was very, very it just made me ecstatic, that you were really, really diving into work there because I do know that there are several people in those areas that don't feel like there is support there.
Sure.
So yeah, I guess I will welcome Dr. Diana is here. Hello. And Jeffrey is here. Some of our normals that we normally have, but I guess what would be, first of all, I guess why did you start Oceanview? What was your why?
Great question. So I started Oceanview actually earlier this year. It's been a work in progress for quite a while. I started it so that I could have a more focused practice on LGBTQIA mental health care. There's a handful of mental health providers here in southeastern North Carolina that do specialize in offering gender affirming mental health care. But we're normally pretty disparate and in different practices. So I wanted to create one place that we could be housed under the same roof so that we can provide integrated care eventually. To start, we're just going to be a mental health agency, but eventually want to grow into multidisciplinary. That's really my why, is to have one place that we can, anyone under that LGBTQIA rainbow can show up, get the care they need, get access to resources in the community if that's what it is, or therapy. That's why I do what I do. And I've actually just started recruiting new clinicians to come on at the practice. So hopefully we'll be growing leaps and bounds over the coming months.
Yay! That's awesome. And I know that you're with PsyPact, and that is you can operate over, I think it's 40 states and territories, right?
Yeah, that's right. So as a doctoral level psychologist, you can get the authority to practice what's called interjurisdictional telepsychology, and that's in 42 different states and territories. We also have the U.S. Virgin Islands. in there. So yeah, it allows me to see people by telehealth. Most of my practice is with people in North Carolina, mostly in person. I do have a big chunk of my week that's spent online, but a lot of people are just in person in my office sitting across the room from me. I also do a lot of psychological evaluations for people needing gender affirming care from other states, particularly West Virginia. I was a psychologist there for many years before moving to North Carolina.
Interesting, interesting. Is that, I guess, how many different states can you do that for, like the gender affirming consultations? Like any of
So
them that you do the PsyPact with?
yeah, so if someone were to
Okay.
just Google PsyPact map, PSYPACT map, they can pull up the map of all the different states that I'm authorized to provide care in. And I could do those evaluations, the intakes, therapy sessions. Most of the time, an evaluation is just an interview. It doesn't
Right.
have to go into a lot more depth than that most of the time. So yeah, I can do that no matter where you're at, as long as you're in one of the PsyPact states.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, because I think it's important, that they feel safe when they come in for care. But if you're in a state that is heavily monitored, that you feel very targeted in, I think the availability of getting telehealth is really important right now for people, having that access to care, because you are going to see where a lot of local places, people aren't going to feel safe to walk into them because they know they could be targeted depending on where you live. Luckily, in my area, I've not seen a whole lot of that. I've heard about some of it in some of the more rural areas, but I haven't seen that. Jenny, are you seeing that in Oklahoma?
So, when my son started, we didn't even know it was going to be a gender affirming thing. I mean, we thought he was being seen for symptoms of, some depression, anxiety, that kind of came out. And his therapist was very affirming and wonderful. As far as anything else, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, we're very worried here. We're just very
Mhm.
worried about the future of any kind of gender affirming, even like just gender affirming mental health services, uh,
Right.
which is so, when people hear gender affirming care, they think hormones and and surgeries, and that's just not what that, I mean, it's some of it, but it's not all of it. And I am concerned for here, but I I think that, I don't know, we'll see.
Well,
I think
I see that in my own practice with people, contacting me from around the state of saying, hey, I might be 2 hours away or 4 hours away, um, but I need this evaluation. My insurance is requiring that I have a second evaluation completed by someone who's a doctoral level provider. Can you see me? Either it's too far for me to drive, or I don't feel safe coming
Right.
2 hours away to walk
right.
in to some random person's office. Even though I offer consultation calls before meetings and things like that, that's 15 minutes. You don't know who I am before you walk in,
Right.
and that if
Right.
I'm a safe person, someone that's going to dead name you and misgender you, or if I'm going to be someone that's a proud queer psychologist who's going to be there advocating for you. You don't know.
Right. Yeah,
I
and I
think it
think that's a lot of the question mark right now. I think that's why I believe groups like yours that focus, like I don't want to necessarily label, but right now I think because of the fact that there is such a safety aspect to it, I think them knowing that it's a safe space, knowing that it's gender diverse and that's what it's created for them.
Right.
I think that does provide a lot more space for them to feel safe, and with the medical community, that's just not an easy thing to do, especially for somebody who's trans, especially for someone who's trying to come out, who's gender diverse right now and trying to
Yeah.
get care with the possibilities on the horizon of what could come about. Like that brings on panic and anxiety for so many people. And that's been a lot of what I've heard too, like parents calling in and what's
Am I
going to
going to be put
happen?
on a
What are we
list?
going to do? Yeah. Do we need leave? Do we
Yeah,
need to start getting our passports? Do we need to start doing documentation? And it's like,
right.
okay, slow down, breathe, breathe.
Yeah.
Because things, although they're going to try to do things, I don't know how far they'll go. And I don't know how long it will take to get there. And if you're constantly living in anxiety, it doesn't do you any good. It causes nothing but chaos, and it
I don't
causes
know,
nothing
Amber.
but
I don't know. Like, my anxiety is what got stuff done last time. There are some
true.
of us who, like, it's like Wonder Twin powers activate when the anxiety hits. I spoke with a gal who reached out to me based on a TikTok video I did, and she said her daughter had just come. I mean, like, we're talking a couple weeks ago, had just come out of trans, and you know, they're in Austin, Texas, and Austin is just known for being, you know, blue, but they're in Texas. Austin exists there. And she said, you know, that her number one concern is, if I, now this is an 18-year-old, so, you know, I can't even imagine what people with minor children are going through. And her whole thing was, if I take him anywhere, if I take him to any kind of, because we have the diversity health clinic here in Oklahoma, a couple locations, and they provide all sorts of services, you know, specifically to the LGBTQ plus community. And, you know, she was like, I'm afraid if I even take her there, that I'm going to be put on some kind of list. And that was just such a real thing to hear somebody say. You know, there's just a lot of confusion and fear right now. And it's so easy to go, well, we don't know how long it's going to take. And you are right. I mean, don't get it twisted, you know, but that anxiety for some people is like, and what can set us into motion. So I'm gonna
Oh
have
no, no, and
a
I don't.
healthy level of anxiety.
Right. Well, I mean, I think like for me, I call it being frustrated forward. Like you get,
Right,
it's
right,
like, what do I do with this? And oh, it pushes you to activate, to move, to
right.
motion. But for myself, as somebody who just for a very long time lived in a constant state of anxiety, always worried the other
Absolutely.
shoe was going to drop and doomsday was on the horizon, it is important to realize that you can't do
Right.
anything about 2.5, 3 months down the road. You can actively make a plan now. You can make steps
Right.
toward your goals and what you want to do and make just in case plans in case things happen. But if you live in that state of fear and you're
Yeah.
always living in that state of fear, it's just not good. It's not
It's
good for your
crippling.
health. It is. It can be crippling after a while. And that was my point because I just lived after finally crawling out of that hole at the beginning of last year, realizing that I had lived in fear in this loop, this negative fear loop, anxiety loop for 34, 5, 6 years of my life. Yeah, I don't want anybody else to get stuck there because it took me a lot to figure out how to get off that hamster wheel because that's all I did was, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And yeah, breathe.
Are you seeing a lot of that going on right now, Michael?
I am. And I just want to really highlight that. I think it's beautiful the way the two of you are talking about the anxiety piece of this, because really, in my opinion, somewhere in between is the
Right.
best place to be. Living in that mindful moment of, I am in the here and now. What happens in the future, I can plan for from the here and now, but I'm not living it. So let's use
Right.
that anxiety and plan ahead, cope ahead for what we're afraid of, and
Hmm.
then remind ourselves that we're
That we're
here.
still here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Right,
has not happened
right.
yet, and we don't know what it's going to look
Yeah.
like. And hopefully, the things that have been promised to be on the forefront are not actually coming towards us. But yeah, Jenny,
Right.
to your point, yeah, I mean, this anxiety and fear. I guess for the last week and a half, the primary conversations I've been having are, what do we do? What happens? But I have been so impressed by the younger folk that I work with
Yeah.
who are not focusing on themselves in the least, actually. They're focusing on how they can be there for their friends
Yep.
and for the people their own age, their peers. And that has been so beautiful. I've heard so many people echoing sentiments of, this is not going to destroy me because I'm not going to let this destroy my friends. And I think when we can take that piece
Love it.
and say, if you can't be there for yourself, then be there for someone else. We all have someone that's counting on us and relying on us. And if we can be strong for them, just like the two of you are doing, for the people that matter to you,
Right.
then we can pull ourselves through even those difficult times.
It can be tricky too as a parent to not pull your kids into that. You know, they still need to be kids. And when I think about very, very young people that right now are going through a whole lot, I have a friend with an 8-year-old who is gender questioning, whatever you want to call it. I don't want to put a word on somebody that they haven't given me to describe themselves. But, you know, I look at that, his anxiety, and think, he shouldn't probably know as much as he knows, you know? Like, I don't know. What do you think about that? Where is the line between, with a young child, like, it's understandable. They're going to pick up, they're going to hear the things we say, depending on what we put on our televisions or on our screens. But I worry that having them too much in the middle of that, you know, they especially can't control anything. And if they are convinced that everything is hopeless because they don't, you know, have that broader perspective, adult developed mind, then what?
Well, sure. I mean, for myself, I can catch myself feeling hopeless and as if there's nothing to look forward to in the future. And, you know, so I'm not sure that necessarily having the adult mind that's, you know, supposedly more grown than 8-year-olds is much of a difference. But no, I think, you know, we all have to decide what can our children cope with on a case-by-case basis, whether it's, you know, what shows are we watching at home? Are we keeping, you know, news on around the clock? Is that okay for your family and for your child? Are you watching reality TV 24/7? You know, what are the messages that you're receiving? I do think, you know, part of our job as parents is to protect our children. And we don't want to lie to them that everything's hunky dory and everyone's going to love
Right.
you and accept you. But striking that balance, I think, is a case by case basis. You know, what one child could cope with understanding and knowing is probably going to be very different from the next one.
I think it's also probably what they're already experiencing. Like if they're
Sure.
already getting pushback either from school or from family members or, you know, community, like whatever that is, if they're already dealing with those things, if the parent is like, say you've got the parent that was like mine, there wasn't news, you weren't, well, we didn't live in the age of social media, but I can guarantee you there would have been none in my household. None of my children got phones, nor do they even have access to smartphones, so they were at least 15 or 16 years of age. It was something I didn't want them to be exposed to.
I'm so
Now, my
opposite.
children also grew up with the internet, right? That they turn on like you turn on Microsoft and it's like the top 20 articles of the day are right
Yeah.
there blaring in front of you. So again, if you're non-binary trans, it doesn't matter. You turn on the computer and it's right there. Avoiding it or not, they still see, well, oh, there's somebody talking about me. So I think it just depends on what their day-to-day life looks like and whether they're already having that impact. And if they're not, and they question it, then certainly share with them. But I don't think it should be, oh my gosh, the president's come in and this is Project 2025 and here's the 80 ways that
Right.
he wants to take your existence away. I don't
Right.
think that that's the way that you approach that with your child if your child's already not dealing with impact that way. And even if they are, again, given the age, given their experience of what they're going through, is then how much you do reveal to them and share with them. I don't think it's okay. I don't think you should hide that from your kids, but I don't think like Jenny said, I don't think our fears should be their fears to carry. I know, like I told Jenny, like I remember when my kid came out as trans, um, I had that day or two of, are you sure? And it wasn't really a question like I questioned him at all. It was, I knew already the amount of transphobia that was out there in the world.
Right.
I knew the transphobic person I had been at one point in my life. I knew the transphobia from my community and from family members. And I already knew what different reactions were already going to be if he came out to them. And so that was more my question. And when I realized, I was like, I remember like after a day or two, I was like, you know what? I'm so sorry I said that. That wasn't mine to put on you. That's my fear. That's not your fear. And I have no right to put that on you. because he just wants to live his life. Like, this is me. I couldn't live as that because that's a lie. I just want to be this, move on about my way. He don't want to be loud and proud. He doesn't want to go out and march in the street. He just wants to be able to do everything that everybody else does and not be questioned. And I think that's the reason why I speak, right? So that, and Jenny and I, we talked about that's why we kind of speak out, is so that our kids don't have to, so that
Right.
hopefully they can live their lives the way they choose to live them.
Yeah, and I think it's also when we're thinking about, what we share with our kids, we are not their only source of information. So many kids are, getting these messages and knowing what's going on from their peers at school. I mean, I know just in the last week and a half, the amount of taunting that I've heard about that has occurred as a result of the election.
Yeah.
Phrases such as your body, my choice, being echoed through the hallways of middle schools and high schools. Making fun of other students, elementary school students, like you're going to be deported. Our kids know what's going on. And sometimes if we can be that purveyor of the truth and let them know this is actually what's happening, we can take away some of the scariness of it too.
Right.
So I think, somewhere in between, not denying what is happening in the world, not laying it all out there of let's come up with a, historical analysis of X, Y, and Z. But just
Right.
This is what's happening. This is what you need to know. I'm your parent. My job is to keep you safe. And that's what I'm going to do.
Right.
And we have, if the child is involved in receiving care for, exploring their gender or even transitioning, you have a whole team of people that are not only providing you care, but they're advocating for you. They're trying to keep you protected. They want you to stay safe too, focusing on the positives rather than all the
Right.
negative messages that probably most of us are doom scrolling through in the evening. At least I am, before I impose the self limitation of saying, no, put it down for an hour or two.
Right.
Yeah, I will say, like, I broke, like, I didn't break, but the day before the election, I turned my news feed off on my phone because usually I had my breaking news, my regular smart news. Apple would just throw up everything that I follow. And so I'd tap into it, like, nope, not interested, not interested. I need to check that one out. I need to check that one out. And I just turned it off the day of the election or the night before. I was like, I know this is going to go crazy tomorrow and the days ahead. And that's going to be anxiety for me. So that
Yeah.
was my first self-care, was shut that off. And then the second was, and I am, everybody handles their stress. Everybody handles and is handling what has happened, the outcome of the election, in a different way, depending on our own experiences, right? For me, I didn't want to come on because the same taunting you're saying is going on at schools, and I've heard the same thing. Just as much, the taunting has gone up by 1,500% on social media, including on LinkedIn. And there is a limit of 1,450 blocks on LinkedIn. And I had worked with LinkedIn for about 8-9 months, but up until my surgery of May of 2024, of trying to create better block systems, because it didn't make sense to me why every other social media platform, and let me take that back because X just went back on theirs. But before that, every other social media platform didn't have a limit on blocks, and you just hit block and it was blocked, done, period. And on LinkedIn, that's not the case. And it seems like you can report something for being homophobic, transphobic, racist, hateful, and LinkedIn goes, nope, that doesn't meet our
No.
standards. And
No.
that doesn't make sense. And so some
What-
of my people on LinkedIn have been more expressive than usual since the outcome of the election, because they are scared, they are worried, and they are also advocates for the trans community. So they're very outspoken right now. And so for myself, I have to draw back and not be on LinkedIn as much, because some of those make me want to get angry. And that anger actually gets me, for Jenny, where anger gets you motivated, anger gets me stuck.
I understand.
because I just steam on it. And so for me, it's just like right now, because everybody is hyper, I'm just kind of like, okay, I'll peek in, scroll
Yeah.
through for about an hour a day, and then like, I'm out, I'm done, close
Well,
down.
what
And
are
if
you
somebody
doing
tags
on
me,
Twitter? First of all, what are you doing on Twitter? And yes, I will always dead name Twitter. Get on Blue Sky. It is so friendly and happy there. It is so chill there. Like I just joined and I was like, okay, you can find me there.
I've heard so many people say that in the past 3
It
days.
is the
yep,
happiest, greatest place. It is exactly what it should be. It's not just bots. It's not just hateful rhetoric. It is wonderful. Find me there. I am also a trans loving mom. I'm a trans loving mom everywhere I go. Blue Sky is great. It's great. And it looks, I haven't been on Twitter for 8 years. I got off Twitter in 2016, go figure. And probably was
2013, 2012,
right. So
2011.
I was, but I got on there and it seems to be pretty much the same. But I do have I did post on my, whatever the heck you call it on there, my page. Somebody had like an intro to Blue Sky starter, like here's how to navigate all this stuff. So, I'll watch that later. Anyway, it's a friendly, happy place. I love it.
I do
Awesome.
recommend it. I do
A nice
recommend it.
plug.
I've seen a lot of people talk about, well, it's the problem with and what we noticed with X, Twitter, is that hate and disinformation, misinformation have just been allowed to proliferate. Whereas before there was typically someone in there to say, oh, balance here. No,
Yeah.
that is
What
hateful. That's
happened?
discriminatory. You can't say that. Right? And Blue Sky, from my understanding, is upholding their rules. Like they have rules. You have to do this. You can't say this and you can't be that way. And I worry a little bit that we're going to create an echo chamber
I don't
so
care.
that, no,
I don't
girl,
care.
I feel your fire. I feel your fire. But so Twitter used to be a place where we could actually have a conversation. We could have a discourse, right? A civil discourse. And it's getting more and more hotter and heated,
Yeah.
right? And that's why Blue Skies is a great place to have. I want there to be regulations. I want there to be safeguards in place and people that will follow those safeguards. But I don't want it to become such an echo chamber that we can't have a civil discourse. That's already what's going on in politics and the reason why we have the divide that we have. We can't have a conversation. We can't agree to disagree. And if we can't have a conversation, and so a friend of mine last night was kind of brought this up about Blue Sky, and I was just like, well, the problem is, or at least the hope is that there are a lot of people that are seeing who got elected is not center, is not what the party used to be. And I'm not saying anything and trying to promote or uphold a party, but it's become rather cultish, that top part. And so what they were saying is people who were more centrist, who are more willing to have those civil discussions, who were conservative, would likely go to Blue Sky as well so that they can continue to have that discourse. Because I want us to be able to have that conversation. Now, I think you still will have them go over there. I think X will just become this echo chamber of really, I hate to say it, extreme people who want to fight. And I don't want to fight. I want to have a conversation so we can be able to agree to disagree and move ahead where everybody is still upheld. Now, you can have your beliefs, but please don't smudge them in my face, right?
And perhaps that's what we're being called on as in our roles as advocates, is to bring that conversation to the bigger public. So every year I do training. I offer trainings on gender affirming care across the lifespan to pre-doctoral internships in clinical psychology at a couple of different universities around the country. And one of the faculty members there has seen my presentation develop over the last 9-10 years, the training that I provide. And she was speaking with me actually last year. She said, I remember about 10 years ago, the presentations that you were giving on gender affirming care were basically transgender people exist. They are real, they are out there, and you need to provide care to them. And that was about the depth that we got into in an hour-long training or a 2-hour-long training. And now, we're actually giving trainings on here is what gender affirming care looks like. This is how to complete an evaluation or an assessment for surgical readiness. This is how to do the different pieces that we're called on to do rather than just accepting that someone exists. We can now talk about, well, when this person shows up in your clinic, how do you provide them with medically necessary care?
Right.
And I'm afraid we're moving backwards at this point. The pendulum is somewhat sliding back to present us with that challenge again to talk about people's humanity, that not only do we exist, but we are human beings and we have a right to exist.
I mean, and that's kind of what I told somebody when we were talking about the DEI and the attack that you're going to see, that we've already seen, that's going to come down, including HR 9495 that they were trying to push through last week, that actually is going to come back to the floor again, to have more conversation about, where they're trying to pass it as a terrorism bill, but it pretty much gives them the ability to shut down any nonprofit that they consider terrorist. And we know that given certain rhetoric, that certain parties have said that DEI, critical race theory, and gender affirming care, these things would all be terrorist in their opinion. I won't even go into further because I'm not even trying to go into things that are worldwide, global, that are further issues that are even bigger than that. But the possibility of them being able to do that and what DEI could then look like, the funding that would be cut for DEI, the pushback against DEI. And what we were talking about was that it's almost like we're going to have to change it back to, can we just go back to saying that we're all human beings, that everybody deserves humanity? Is that where we've got to go to get this through? And I feel like that's where we need to go back. Let's go back to the drawing board. How about we're all human beings? Can we agree with that? And I don't even know that you get some people to agree.
Right. I'm like, if it hasn't worked yet, what in the world? I don't know.
Yeah, I was about a month ago, I was able to present at the World Professional Association for Transgender Health Conference. And one of the people on my panel that was presenting was talking about how much progress has been made in India with gender affirming care. And I thought it was beautiful because the way that they have approached this is to talk about, hey, here's ancient art that is celebrating trans and gender diverse folk. And these people were very important members of our culture before colonization. And we need to bring back this piece of our culture by embracing these different groups that we were taught were wrong or bad, but that we had always held as a cornerstone of our culture and our society. We need that back again. It was just beautiful.
They were considered sacred. I mean, they were considered sacred. My daughter did a project on this. It's an indigenous group from Canada because she was doing a Canadian artist, and they were actually two-spirited. It was a two-spirited artist who is now recreating art from like the 17 and 1800s the way it should have been depicted. Instead of it being the indigenous attacking colonists, he's depicting it the way that it should have been. And using like a lot of the same paints, and the paints back then were used from actual root tinctures and so forth. And so she had actually, that was her whole thesis, was actually working with like creating her own paint tinctures from plants in our yard and berries and flowers and all this kind of stuff. But that was what she got invited to the world. What is it? Art History Symposium at New York SUNY.
Oh, wow.
The New Pots Art Symposium. She did that for her senior project. And she was like one of the only art majors, because that was the art history was like a side class that she took. But they loved her project so much that they entered her into it. And she was one of these presenters at this thing. And like, I remember her preparing for it because she was going to possibly have literally people from Columbia and Harvard and Yale asking her questions about the art and the artist and why she used it, why she wanted to talk about it. And she was just like so prepared. And like literally the first person on there was from Columbia University. And she was just like, because I could watch it through Zoom and everything was done by Zoom, but she's just like, I love my daughter, but she's pale as can be, and she went white. I thought, ooh, just hang on. And she got it together and spit it out, and I was like, you go, girl. But again, that was like her interest in it was she has a trans brother. She was interested in it because here was two-spirited being recognized again. And
Mhm.
honestly, what the thing is they're depicted again, trans people are depicted, non-binary are depicted so horribly. And what she was bringing back was, okay, again, you're talking of people who were considered sacred. Two-spirited were sacred. In India, they were sacred. And that's been lost upon people, and instead it's something that people should be ashamed of. And I don't know. I think if we could go back to actual history, like you said, like people talking about it never existed before, and Jenny and I talked about
I'm
it
gonna
here
be
on the
right
show.
back. Y'all keep talking. I'll be right back.
Okay, Jenny and I have talked about it before. Like there are recorded records back to the Copper Age, 3,000 years ago, of the first trans people, and so it's kind of like it's been here. This is not new.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing that we're doing today that was just created today, for the most part. I
Nope.
mean, even the internet has history at this point. So, social media, all these different pieces, we people have always existed. All of our ways of expressing ourselves, all of the ways for identifying ourselves have arguably always been there and have developed. I mean, if we look just at human beings from an evolutionary perspective, everything about us today has been developed because it benefits us in some way, whether it's our emotions, our thinking, our reasoning, our speech, our identity is no different. Every part of us has developed to be the best version of ourselves that we can be. So where do I have the right to question anyone who has developed? If they're not harming themselves or someone else, then do what you are called to do. Be who you are called to be.
I went and got a book that I would like to recommend just because it seems very apropos at this moment. And it's called Before We Were Trans. It's by Kit Hyam, and it is a new history of gender. And it's going to go into just a lot of historical, like individuals, concepts, how the concept of gender has changed over time. But it really does talk about a lot of, people that we didn't realize, we weren't always taught in history, and brings them to light. It's a really great freaking book. I absolutely recommend it. About a quarter of the way through it. But anyway, just wanted to point that out.
I was sitting here, Dr. Diana have written some stuff in the comments, and I can't see the entire comment on either one of them, but she was talking about both the Hira in India and the Navajo, because again, they both had their own, but again, these were cultural entities that now we want to say, oh, no, they don't exist. That wasn't true. Forget history. And, whew,
And we have all existed throughout time. As long as our stories haven't been erased, we're there.
right? Right? And even if they've been erased, they're still there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't want to get
And
hot on
then,
that one.
and then, as Dr. Diana mentions, the Hijra and all the different gender identities within the continent, beyond
Right?
Hijra, and all the different versions of Hijra identity, all encompassing something slightly different depending on where the individuals
Right.
lived and their roles in that society.
Well, I think it's interesting too with society, like how we look at different, how we frame it. I have this one person that comes into Mama Bear, my audio room, who always looks at it because she's from the Philippines, and so she's Catholic, and she always comes with a very interesting view of Christianity because she is looking at the way Jesus and God are represented and uphold the community in her area compared to what is said and how it's pushed against the community more here in the States. And she was like, and I don't understand that because for us, God created you exactly as you were made. And if you were trans, he made you that way. And we love you exactly as you are. Every part of our community. And so I think then that is like beautiful to me that they look at it that way, whereas here is definitely not considered. Not at least from the viewpoint of how I grew up and from the churches that I grew up in that were Southern Free Will Baptist. This is not accepted. This would not be how Jesus made you. That would not be their opinion. And so we always have these very interesting viewpoints that we talk about within that room. But I think when you look at it from the global aspect and even look at how they frame it, even with religion, here they're using religion to uphold the whole person because they made you exactly beautifully as you are. And I think that is so, because honestly, I had somebody who come in the room who was trying to push and honestly say that if my child accepted Jesus, that would fix his transgenderism. And I was like, there is nothing to fix. There's nothing to fix. And she from another country was like, ho, ho, ho. Let me just say right now that I'm from the Philippines and this is what Jesus, and this is how we look at it. And that kind of shut that person down because she was like, this is a room about supporting trans children. In other words, like, if you don't get that message, you just need to go. But I loved that she was using how they look, how they view religion. And that honestly is just so different from how it's viewed here that honestly I get triggered a lot of times when you talk about religion and when it comes to my kid because people are typically using it as a weapon,
Yeah.
not
Justice,
as
do
acceptance.
you see a lot of religious trauma that plays into some of the difficulties that maybe LGBTQ plus folks have, around their issues? I don't know what I'll say.
You know, the whole concept of religious trauma is actually a fairly newer one in clinical aspects of how we're looking at the aversive experiences related to religion, how that impacts us later on today. Rather than that, actually, what I see with most of the adolescents is a blocking out of faith from their life. Basically, the idea being like, you continue to hurt me with these messages, and people are weaponizing spirituality and religion. Why would I choose to subject myself to that?
Right.
I would say that's our experience. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm seeing a lot of people stepping away from that or finding themselves in supportive faith communities.
Right.
Hopefully, um, people know that there are supportive faith communities that will welcome them and love them and cherish what they bring to the body of the religion. But I think that's often hidden behind all the big voices, the loud rhetoric. But no, I find most people are just walking away, saying, if you don't want me, fine, you won't have me.
Right.
And I hate to see that because I do believe that for us to be functioning at our best, we need something outside of ourselves that we dedicate to. And it doesn't have to be religion or spirituality or anything, but that is just a natural way that throughout millennia, human beings have found to do that, to have a connection with a bigger whole. And I think, if we go back to when I was a kid and my relationship with religion, being a queer youth, not knowing where I fit in, I went through that stage of saying, well, I need to walk away. This is not somewhere that I want to be, and they don't want me. And to later come back around and say, oh, I just hadn't found my people or my place yet. There is somewhere for me. So that's why I try to let people know is, keep trying, keep reaching out, keep trying to find your people in your tribe, in your place, because you will find them. There may be lots of failures along the way, and that's perfectly okay, but we've got to keep trying.
I always recommend Unitarian Church. I'll tell you what, those people love everybody, all faiths, all people, all kinds. I love a Unitarian Church.
And I know Dr. Diana, she's actually putting up here the Lutheran churches, because I know she's spoken at Lutheran churches, and that they're really accepting. And I think it does depend on the community. Like, I'm in the South, like last here. I'm just gonna say it. It'll be the last here. because my parents, they've been part of what I would consider non-denominational churches for over 2 or 3 decades, and honestly, you either, I hate to say it, you either lean more into the what I would say the teachings of Jesus are, or you lean into the political ideology, one way or the other.
Right.
And my parents didn't go to a church where they won't be part of one that dictates who you should vote for, this or that. Like it's about the acts of Jesus, kindness, compassion, acceptance, inclusion. And if they went to one that suddenly started going against that community, they'd leave. Like they would automatically leave. And so you see a little bit of it emerging in places. But again, I feel like when you talk about the youth, yeah, my kids are just kind of like, I'll read a book on spirituality, or,
Yeah.
I'll figure it out later. But they just don't feel like it's accepting of them or of their sibling. So they're just kind of like, yeah, mm-mm. They kind of see it man-made a little bit. That's their viewpoint. But where we're at, it's easy to feel that way because it is so weaponized against my children. Jenny and I talked about it last week. I had one relative reach out and was like, A, what is Amber going to do with her work? And B, what about her son? And other than that, nobody else questioned, said anything, which a lot of them don't know. But at the same time, it just kind of brought up that thing of, they're out of sight, out of mind. It doesn't bother them. It's not going to affect them, so they don't think about it. Um, and yeah, I would like us to move to a place where everybody felt like they were accepted. But I do think it is that way with your faith community, regardless of whether you're part of the LGBT community or not. Faith and where you feel comfortable is always going to be an individual experience. So if that's something important to you and you don't feel included where you're at, keep looking. You will find your place.
I noticed that Dr. Diana is listing a lot of Lutheran churches around North Carolina. I know here in my corner of the state, we have some very supportive faith communities here in the Wilmington area and, around southeastern North Carolina. I realize from a national standpoint or an international standpoint, those of us in North Carolina or the American South don't have a lot of good reputation when it comes to equality and access to care or even acceptance. But, I find on the ground in these areas, the truth is much more muddy than that. In the South, you can be accepted and you can, this is not a place where we have to run away from. This is a place where we can thrive and be the best version of ourselves. You don't have to leave the country, even though a lot of people are deciding to do that right now or looking into it. Some of us will stay and some of us will continue the work that's ahead of us, and some aren't able to right now, and that's okay. But, as Dr. Diana is pointing out, there's all kinds of faith communities that are supportive. I know that for myself. And we do have to find those people, whether it's our chosen families, our chosen friends,
right,
our faith communities.
The same thing. And yeah, like I think it's the same with your religion as it is with your family. You choose what works best for you. Just given my history, that is something that I kind of walked away from, and I'm a spiritual person, and I lean more on source and what I honestly would consider Mother Nature than anything else. If we focused on Mother Earth and moved outward in that direction, I think we'd line up a lot better with everything. But that's easy for me to that's just how my mind works, and that's easy for me to think. But I think finding your supports that work for you, whether it be mental health supports, whether it be your spiritual supports. Um, right now, I think the key is to find support. If you're
Right.
feeling vulnerable, I think that's the key right now is to find support. And I think that's probably the message that you've probably been getting the last couple of weeks, Michael, and Jenny and I have been feeling from A, our audience, but B, like our own experiences, is that everybody is kind of we're kind of in limbo of what is going to happen, and the level of support that you need is what you should seek.
And that
Whatever
there
that
are
looks like.
people, yeah, no one knows what's coming. I can guarantee everyone out there, though, that there are people that are behind closed doors that are working towards good also. They're trying to figure out,
Right,
if this happens, then what do we do? If this
right,
happens, how do we respond? How do we come together to be who our patients, our clients, our family, our friends need? Um, because those of us that are using our voices have the privilege of having a voice, and we cannot let
right.
this moment being the time that we lose it.
No, no, absolutely. And I think that was probably the biggest thing that I could take away this week was just that everybody does to a level of what they can do in a given day. Because I had some people who are kind of like, I just can't go out there. And I'm like, okay, that's okay today.
Sure.
If you need to pull back today, pull back today. Like self-care so that tomorrow you can go back out there and you can be there for your clients or be there for your child or whatever their situation may be. I had quite a few educators who were suddenly very upset about what could happen with as far as like funding and what that meant for gender affirming, as far as in the classroom, and then what do they do as supports, especially counselors within high schools. What do we do? So there is a lot of, and it's going to come down to the state. It's going to come
Right.
down to, well, not necessarily the state. It will just come down to what gets passed and what gets allowed.
Mhm.
And I think if we get too caught up in that, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, then yeah, you live in panic. So I do think that right now everybody is it's kind of what I was advising in the last couple of weeks is get your plans in place. If something happens, if you lose your insurance, start looking at other insurances, that private insurances that you can afford, right? Care that you can afford that would still offer these things. Or if you need to go out of state, where would you go? Who is it would you go to? Like if you want to move, what state would you move to? Could you afford to live in that area? Where would you work? Like start looking for resources in those areas as well. And are they going to be available just because you think that you're leaving your state because it's bad? Are you sure that where you want to go has what you need as well? Like that's another really important one. Don't just pick up and go, oh, as long as I'm across the state line in California, I'm great. That's not
Mhm.
necessarily true. So I think there is some, I don't know, I saw a lot of panic and I just want people to calm down, get your fire extinguisher out. It's not January yet. Just
Yeah, I think, identifying what is within your control in these moments is one of the most important things all of us can do, because we don't know what's coming. But if you have paperwork that needs to be finalized, name change, need to submit something to Social Security, and you've been sitting on that for 3 months, go ahead,
move.
take those steps. Do those things. Figure out, like you were saying, if I'm moving out of the country or out of the state, is that realistic? Can I actually do that? I've heard a lot of um, knee-jerk reactions of, well, I'm going to fill in the blank name of country. Um, that's not the easiest thing to do.
Right.
So look into it and figure it out. Find providers in other countries, other states. There are wonderful resources to find those. Reach out to the local LGBTQIA centers in the area where you're thinking of going and ask, what's it like there? Um,
Right.
you know,
Because
do
I
what you
think that
can
was
do.
that was the biggest thing for me is somebody was kind of like, I had a friend who was kind of like, well, can you seek asylum in another country? And I was just like, you know what the number one country was for that? And she's like, what? And I was like, you want to know what the number one country was for seeking asylum for your gender identity? us. And,
Hmm.
and she was like, oh.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, like they're
And by the
next.
way, Canada does not want us. They are sick of our shit too. Canada was like,
Right?
no, no, we're done.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I do think it is. I don't know. I'm trying not to panic. I am. I do know the first day I was kind of like, ah! Afterwards, I really couldn't even. Number one, I was trying to help my kids, and my kids were just kind of little fireballs. The next day, nobody was happy in my house.
Hmm.
My parents were unhappy next door. Like everybody was just like, how? Right? Knee jerk, that gut. And I think a lot of the last week or so has been everybody kind of coming down from that. So I have been kind of just been like, all right, just take a deep breath. What can we do today?
Right.
Hmm.
What can you do today? And make that list, like you said, like make that plan. But again, that plan could be, okay, in the next month, this is what I need to cover. Okay, just do, but what can you do today? And if you don't knock everything off that list today, okay, you got tomorrow. A lot of grace, a lot of space right now, because when you hit your limit, my first advice is pull back. Just close the laptop. You're done for the day. Because when I hit when I hit my point, I'm like, you know what? I'm done. I'm good. I'm good here. I'm peacing out. And like I'll message people back like, I'm sorry. I appreciate you giving me a few extra days. I've been overloaded. But if I've got too much coming in already from my client base that I can't even help them because I'm not taking care of me, I can't even begin to try and handle the rest of it. So I do think it's really important for everybody to like take it one day at a time and handle what you can. Um, so you do have enough to continue the next day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, this is a long fight for us. This is not going to be resolved in the next week or month or year. So do not wear yourself out now. Do
Right?
what you need to do. There's a wonderful therapy technique called coping ahead that I love. And coping ahead is sometimes when people hear those words, they say, oh, you just want me to imagine that everything's going to work out wonderfully well, right? No, 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 no. That's not what coping ahead is about. Let's imagine the worst case scenario is realized. How can you succeed and how can you thrive even if the worst case scenario happens, and actually see yourself succeeding and being that person that you need to be to get through even the worst case scenario? Is that you leaving the area? Is it you standing up and expressing a voice? Is it, you know, what exactly do we do? We exist and we thrive and we don't let ourselves be torn down. So we cope ahead. We allow those worst case scenario moments to play through our mind and say, well, even if that happens, I am going to be the best version of myself. It's kind of like, I think Jenny and I are a little similar. When I get pissed off or angry, that's when I get things accomplished. You know, does that mean I'm going to be standing there on my soapbox screaming and yelling? Generally so, yeah. But, you know, also sometimes it's shutting up and listening. And sometimes it's just sitting back and saying, no, this person is receiving medically necessary care with a team of highly qualified professionals, period. There's no need to be on a soapbox. We're doing what we need to do. Your opinion is not necessary. You know,
Amen.
how do we thrive
Love.
in these moments?
Love. I got to ask you one more question as we wrap up. What psychologically sound advice would you give to folks moving into this holiday season? I personally am just not fucking dealing with it, but there are people who have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And for those people, they don't have a choice, especially young people who get carted around to different families regardless. You know,
Yeah.
or there's
Well,
other situations. Yeah.
yeah, I've had this conversation a whole lot. What I'm recommending to people going into this holiday season is actually asking yourself ahead of time, being proactive. What is my primary goal in this interaction, in this family dinner? What do I actually want to get out of this? Do I want to convince someone else that they're wrong and to change their opinion? Do I want to improve and maintain relationships? Do I want to improve and maintain my self-respect at the end of the day? Now, those three we can mix and match however we need. Sometimes it's just one, sometimes there's two, sometimes there's three. Now, there is a fourth option also, and I alluded to this a moment ago. That's being right. Unfortunately, I sometimes prefer being right, and I will argue and argue and argue to try to convince someone else of whatever it may be, but that's generally not effective. So what I recommend is going in, asking yourself, are you wanting to change someone? Or are you wanting them to do something differently? Are you asking them to advocate for you, perhaps? Are you asking them to drop their opposition to your identity and your existence? Are you asking them to use your name and pronouns? What are you asking for? Is that your goal? Or do you want to improve and maintain your relationship with this person over all other things? Is that the most important thing to you? Or is it your self-respect? In most situations, it's some combination of those, but by asking yourself that up front, you can generally go in and be more intentional in what you're choosing to do, even in these difficult moments. So I hope that answered your question, but that's what comes to my mind.
It did. I do feel for, especially, like my kids are older. My kids are 17 and 19. They get to decide where they're going to be, who they're going to be around. I've made my choice for sure. But, I feel for younger kids who do just get really carted around. And it's, well, that's just how Mima is, or, oh, yeah, Uncle Stupid's going to be there. But, that's just his generation. And I think, I personally, if I were a young person, I'd be like, my goal is to be left alone. Like, I don't want you to talk to me. And then people are going to, and they're going to say the things that they say. And I just, my heart goes out to those kiddos. So.
Yeah. And especially the kiddos who may not have had even found their voice yet.
Right. Oh.
I remember being a kid. I'll date myself a little bit here. I was a closeted little gay kid when Ellen came out on TV, and I remember hiding myself under the blankets of my bed and just being so enthralled with, oh my God,
yeah,
there's representation.
Yeah.
I didn't have my voice yet. I'd have to go to those family gatherings and listen to whatever I was listening to. But if you have your voice, decide if you want to use it. Is it worth your time and effort? It may be, it may not be.
Yeah. Hey,
I guess whatever.
least, maybe they actually will leave you alone at the next holiday and not invite you back. And if that's your goal, go for it.
Silver lining moment, right?
That's me. I'm like, y'all don't want me here. Trust me.
Mm-hmm. Mine are adult, and mine was an adult when he came out, and because he had grown up. So for us, the parents would all kind of gather together, right, and hang out. And then you had the space where the kids all went and hung out, after meal or whatever, till you opened up presents. So there was an upstairs, I guess, den, if you will, that all the kids would go hang out at holidays. And that might be where they went and sat and ate dinner and whatever else, while the parents were talking about politics and religion and guns, because that was what was discussed at holidays. Those three topics.
Yeah.
Fun. Kids didn't want to be around that. There were times I ate upstairs with the kids for that reason. But so my children had grown up around my cousins and hearing their political beliefs, their ideologies. And so when my son came out, he knew there was no place for him.
Mm-hmm.
Why put himself through it? He was just I have heard years of their homophobia. I don't even have to question about my transphobe or about whether they'd be transphobic. I've already heard the homophobia. There's no question.
Yeah.
So he was just kind of and because we only spent 2 holidays with them a year, literally, we live 2.5 hours away. He was just kind of why do I have to share?
Mm-hmm.
I know their response. They're not part of my everyday life. My parents are, and so they know. But otherwise, that's it, because the majority of our family isn't close. They aren't nearby, and they're not an interaction. And he's kind of no harm, no foul. And I get it. And I'm kind of like away from my family anyway. Like when we moved up here, it was kind of like not like you turned on your rural family in the South, but it was kind of like you moved to the city, and
Hmm.
we didn't, but we're kind of treated like the city
Yeah.
folk now, kind of thing, and it's weird, but it's rural North Carolina, guys. What can I say?
Yeah.
That's how it is. That's how it is. Well, we are over time as usual, as always us. But Michael, thank you so much for coming. And like I said, we are going to bring Michael back to talk about the social justice pieces that he is a part of because he does a lot of work there. And I definitely wanted to highlight that. But there was so much work there that I was kind of like, after I'd already created the event, I hit him up and I was like, hey, you want to do 2 episodes? And I always think of that like after I've created the event. So then I'm like hitting Jenny up, hey, it's not just going to be this one. So we will probably bring Michael back sometime in December to do the
Yeah.
next piece. But we just wanted, and I know Dr. Diana was putting comments in for you about coming on Paradox of Gender, her podcast. And yeah, like I think, and that you can get up with her. I'm pretty sure.
Sure.
I'm not sure if y'all are connected, but I'm pretty sure y'all are connected already.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah,
I
but
think
she is
LinkedIn somewhere.
right. Like everybody on LinkedIn is eventually we're all connected in this little circle, I think. Or I hope to be anyway. But with that, thank you guys for joining us this evening. And next week, I am not entirely sure because everything's just so
Yeah,
fluctuating.
I haven't heard back from them. I know that probably right now they are just doing a whole lot of scrambling. I have some folks over at the Oklahoma Equality Law Center. They are actually handling my son's name and gender marker change or correction rather. And I would love to have them on. They're incredible human beings. But I mean, it's a lot of people over here in Oklahoma are in panic mode and are
Right.
using that resource.
I may hit Katie up and see if she's available for next week then, because she's in North Carolina doing the same thing.
Right.
So, but to again talk about documents and gender changes and like any questions that people have, just to
Yeah.
kind of give you insight into what you could be doing right now in the meantime to prepare.
Yeah.
To get ready for what you need, or if you just have any questions about getting these things taken care of. So I put in the comments for you guys there's actually, I'll be honest, I didn't realize that Oceanview had its own page until you like the post that I had created on LinkedIn, and I was like, oh, let me add another one. So I added that one today, but I'd also already put the website. So if y'all want to contact Dr. Stinnett or at Oceanview, actually I had pulled it up and we never even, I'll grab it real quick. This is Oceanview there. If I can scroll the page up a little bit so you can see, but you can find them at oceanviewofwilmington.com. And again, I will put that when we put it on TikTok, I'll add that in there and then on Spotify and YouTube, so that everybody's got that information and where to find you. But we greatly appreciate it. I'm glad you were able to make it this week. We've been trying to, kind of after the election, it was like we need to start doing like resources and self-care and mental health and tapping into a little bit more of this right now because it is going into the holidays. We didn't really get a chance to talk about holiday work beforehand, and it was the same thing that we wanted to be able to offer these things to people getting ready to go into, if you're going to celebrate Thanksgiving next week, and going into the holiday season, the Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate season, like again, important things to think about, be prepared for, create your plans.
Love
I think
that.
that's the best thing you can do right now. So with that being said, thank you guys for joining us. We will be back
It was
next
my
week.
absolute pleasure, Michael. Thank you so much for
Thank you all so much for having me. I really appreciate you.
Yes, definitely. And if y'all need to get up with Dr. Michael, please, Dr. Stinnett, please get up with Oceanview. Seek him. And if you have any questions, you can always hit Jenny or up too. If you're on TikTok and you can't find resources and so forth and you need to get a hold, then definitely reach out and we'll get you squared away. So that being said, thank you guys. We'll see y'all next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.